Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be talking about the changes and updates coming to Summoner in Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, Shadowbringers. This information is coming to you from the North American media tour I attended recently. As such, all of this stuff is still in development. We're going to put a watermark at the bottom, and keep in mind that potencies, skill effects, any of this stuff can change before Shadowbringers actually launches. So with that, let's get started. We'll talk more about the pets and the summon changes when we actually get there, but first, let's look at some of the skills that are mostly the same. Physic, Resurrection, Fester, Enkindle, and the pet attacks from Enkindling, Pain Flare, Bio, Miasma, and Summon Bahamut are all roughly the same. A big thing is that Bio and Miasma at all levels are 30 seconds now, which, just like with Bard, thank goodness for that. There were also a few removed skills as well. Because pets can't be targeted and thus can't be hurt anymore, Sustain is gone. You don't need it, bottom line. Etherflow is also gone, and they've changed the way that Summoner interacts with their Etherflow stacks. Keep in mind, only the spell Etherflow is gone, you still have Etherflow stacks. And Shadow Flare is gone. I guess I'm not too surprised to see it go. After it changed in Stormblood, I wasn't really a big fan of it, but I'm still going to miss it to some degree. Now there's also a bunch of skills that were a combination of either changed or missed. While we will say the ones that are actually available now, basically a bunch of the pet actions underwent changes as well. Some of the most noticeable ones are going to be Shockwave being gone, no one misses it, trust me, and Contagion. Yeah, Contagion didn't make it quite through, so sorry, but there's not really much else to say there. Radiant Shield is gone as well, and then there's just a bunch of changes to the ways the pets actually work. Some skills are similar, but may have slightly different names, but we'll get to that when we actually talk about the pet actions. Next up, let's look at the skills that Summoner still has from the previous expansion, but have undergone some changes. All of your Ruin spells now have their potency increased if the target you're casting them on is afflicted with Bio and Miasma. So it's almost like a Sidewinder, but for every single spell you're going to cast. So having your dots down just became a much worse thing. Also, specifically for Ruin 4, your further Ruin procs that you would need to use Ruin 4 before, you can now get multiple of them. You can store multiple of them if you earn too many of them in quick succession, so that way they don't go to waste. Now, all three of your summons, Garuda, Titan, and Ifrit, are all instant casts now. We already mentioned that they're no longer targetable by enemies or players, but we should probably take this time to talk about the changes to the way the pets actually work. Your pet skills are no longer on the pet hotbar, and instead the summoner now has actions that directly tell their pet when to use their special attacks. These new skills, Eggy Assault 1 and 2, consolidate all of the skills from your pet so you don't need every individual one on your hotbar. Each of the assaults, 1 and 2, have their own charges with traits, and they recharge once every 30 seconds. For Ifrit, Eggy Assault 1 will do Crimson Cyclone, which is just 110 potency single target, and Eggy Assault 2 will do 110 potency point blank AoE. He also has an auto attack potency of 135 on a single target. Garuda's auto attack potency is 40, but every single auto attack is AoE. On top of that, Garuda's Aerial Slash, which is her Eggy Assault 1, is a 60 potency AoE, and her Eggy Assault 2 is a 20 potency AoE that leaves behind an Evergale on the ground, which does 20 potency a tick to any enemy in it. So you can clearly see that Ifrit is more of a single target type attacker, and Garuda is more of an AoE type pet. Then what is Titan? Just something in between, I guess? His auto attacks are just slightly weaker single target, and he does have Mountain Buster as a lower potency point blank AoE, but his Eggy Assault 1 is Earthen Armor, which creates a shield around the summoner that absorbs 20% damage. So I could see you using that in like in-between phases, or if you know you're going to take a big hit and you can't really deal damage while you're using it. You could also, of course, use it while you're soloing to prevent yourself from taking a lot of damage, but Titan is kind of just as awkward as ever in my opinion. Now that we've covered the pets, let's talk about Energy Drain. Now, Energy Drain is basically a combination of Etherflow, which was just removed, and the Energy Drain of old. It now deals damage and generates 2 Etherflow for the summoner to use on a 30-second cooldown. This just makes your Etherflow generation a little bit more linear. People kind of accept that Summoner's Energy Drain before was kind of in a weird place because you had all these other skills you'd be using it on, and Energy Drain was only used in certain circumstances before. You also get a new skill called Energy Siphon, which is basically just an AoE equivalent of Energy Drain. It does 40 potency in an AoE around the target and generates 2 Etherflow, and it shares a cooldown with Energy Drain. So if you're in an AoE, use Energy Siphon to get your Etherflow, single target, Energy Drain. Speaking of ether flow, Bane no longer costs ether flow. It's simply a 10-second cooldown ability, so you don't have to think about not only having less ether flow, but still needing to use Bane on any AoE pack. It's just something you'll be able to freely use once you've placed your dots. Try Disaster is also mostly the same, except that it now additionally increases the potency of your new AoE skill, Outburst, by 20 on any inflicted with Ruination. It is a 50-second cooldown now, but that Outburst ability that we just mentioned actually replaces Tribind. It's your just basic AoE DPS spell now. Should probably go back to Bane really quickly because I forgot to mention that Bane eventually gets a trait that allows it to also spread the effect of Ruination from Try Disaster to multiple targets. This is especially important for AoE rotations where you not only want your dots to be spread, but you also want Ruination to be spread so your Outburst can hit harder on every single target. Dreadworm Trance underwent a pretty major change, but its overall function is generally the same. It no longer requires Ether Trail attunement, so using your Ether Flow to get to Dreadworm Trance is no longer a thing. It simply reduces all cast times by 2.5 seconds, it no longer has the Tribind thing because it doesn't really matter, and it sits on a 60-second cooldown. It doesn't grant damage increases anymore, and at level 72, it will grant you 2 Dreadworm Ether, meaning that immediately following Dreadworm Trance's finishing, you can immediately use Summon Bahamut. A few of the remaining abilities that just had minor changes were Death Flare. It now has a fall off of a flat 50% after the first target. Ether Pact, its only effect now is 5% damage to all the nearby party members instead of the mix of effects that it had before. And Enkindle Bahamut had its recast brought down to 10 seconds, down from 13. Realistically, the most important new skill that we haven't mentioned yet between Outburst and the Eggy Assaults is Firebird Trance. So this replaces Dreadworm Trance after you summon Demi Bahamut. So Summoner's new flow of battle is going to have them bouncing back and forth between Firebird Trance and Dreadworm Trance, both of which will allow you to either summon Bahamut or summon Phoenix. Now at level 80, Firebird Trance will actually gain access to Demi Phoenix, and he will be summoned alongside you like your Demi Bahamut would have been. Phoenix's abilities are Scarlet Flame, which is a basic auto attack, very similar to Bahamut's Wyrmwave. Everlasting Flight, which just makes it so that Demi Phoenix actually heals any nearby party members while they're actually out. And of course you have Enkindle Phoenix, which replaces Enkindle Bahamut during Firebird Trance, and it just tells Phoenix to use Revelation, which is basically the same potency as Akmorn, but has a gradual fall off depending on the number of targets, unlike Akmorn's Change status, which just has the flat fall off. However, you do get Firebird Trance at level 72, so what does it change between level 72 and level 80? Well, it's actually going to replace Ruin with Fountain of Fire during Phoenix Trance. Every single time you cast Fountain of Fire, you will get Burgeoning Flame. Then you can cast Brand of Purgatory, which is AoE damage around the target. It's 50% less potency after the first target, but you'll basically be going back and forth between Fountain of Fire and Brand of Purgatory. Just to be clear, Brand of Purgatory does have a higher initial potency on that first target, so it's not just an AoE option during Firebird Trance. Now that's it for the new abilities. They of course did get some new traits as well. Enhanced Enkindle has been changed to just make Enkindle 120 seconds at base once you actually get it. It's 10% reduction per proc that you get thing from before, that's gone. Enhanced Eggy Assault automatically grants further Ruin when using Eggy Assaults 1 and 2, so making sure that you don't use them too quickly and you get as many Ruin 4 procs as you possibly can is now going to be something you can control. You still have the random ones from the auto attacks, but this will give you a little bit more control. Enhanced Try Disaster extends the duration of Ruination to 30 seconds. We already mentioned Enhanced Bane earlier, and on top of that, Enhanced Firebird Trance will be the trait that actually allows you to summon Demi Phoenix at level 80. So I'm not an experienced summoner, but the little bit of time I had to mess around with this felt really good. There wasn't this huge, long build-up into this super phase where you have to go through your ether flow to then get to Dreadworm Trance, to then spend it, to then spend your ether flow again, to then do the Dreadworm Trance again, to then summon Bahamut. Whereas it just felt like it was a lot more streamlined and comfortable. Not necessarily easy, but the mess that was the summoner rotation, as much as it was something that, experienced summoners were able to get used to relatively easily. It just felt like it was easier to understand exactly what my flow of battle was going to be on the new summoner. Now, how it actually pans out in battle, I couldn't tell you. I'm just not experienced enough with the job to really go too deep into exactly how everything's going to go. But a lot of the abilities sound similar enough to where it just sounds like the whole going into your new phase or going into your stronger form thing is just not going to be nearly as stressful. Because it's 60 seconds between trances, you'll have your Run Trance, then your Summon Bahamut, then 30 seconds later, you'd be able to go into Phoenix, and then you're right back to the beginning of your rotation without having to worry about all these separate buffs and debuffs being consumed and spent and all that stuff. Oh, and it also means that your pet use has been a lot more streamlined, and you don't have to worry about micromanaging them nearly as much as you used to before. So all the things that kind of were a little tedious about Summoner before have been kind of streamlined, and you get a new summon with that of Phoenix. Still would have liked a Demi Ifrit and a Demi Garuda and a Demi Titan, but hey, there's always 6.0. Oh, and no news about Eggy Glamour. Sorry. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for my video on Summoner in Shadowbringers. Let me know what you thought in the comment section of the video below. I'd also like to give a shout out to the fellow members of the Final Fantasy XIV content creation community, who I've been shouting out in a bunch of videos throughout the day. I was missing a bunch of skills and traits for a bunch of stuff, just things that I hadn't thought to hover over, or I thought I was recording when I hovered over them, and apparently wasn't. So they've been great in assisting me with getting everything I needed to get all the information out to you, and they're all making content as well, so make sure you don't stop at just watching my video for this stuff. Make sure to go check out the others that are making content as well. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next video, and until then, take care.